Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. It's TheSketchMonkey here. Before I get into this video, I have to say this was one of the most fun redesigns I've made in the history of this channel. So yeah, that says a lot about what we're going to go through today. The car is of course the Toyota MR2, and the thing with the Toyota MR2, if you look at the three generations that's been produced, you have the W10 in the first one, and then the W20, and then the W30, which was the last produced MR2. If you look at these designs from generation to generation, they are all very, very different. So if we were to create a W40 now, it would probably look a lot different from the W30, for example. But let's talk about the MR2 here and give some background about what this car actually is. The MR2 is of course a two-seat mid-engine rear-wheel drive sports car that was manufactured from 1984 to 2007 over, as I said, three generations. You have the W10 from 1984 to 1989, then you have the W20 from 1990 to 99, and of course the last one, the Spider or the Roadster, the W30 from 2000 to 2007. And this was Japan's first mid-engine production car. The name MR2 stands for either mid-ship runabout two-seater, or what makes a little bit more sense to me at least, mid-engine rear-wheel drive two-seater. And the car derived from a 1976 Toyota design study, so it goes way back with the goal to design a car which would be enjoyable to drive, obviously, but without being too expensive to drive or own. And the goal wasn't necessarily at the beginning to create a sports car. Toyota first introduced the first generation MR2 in 1984, designated it the code W10, and it won Car of the Year in Japan that same year. A 5-speed manual transmission was standard, with a 4-speed automatic available as an option. The engine in the beginning, the first generation, put out anywhere from 118 horsepower to 128 horsepower, depending on where the car was sold. So this was dependent on the region where the car was sold in. In 1986, Toyota made a supercharged version of the MR2 with 145 horsepower and a 0 to 60 time of a respectable 6.5 seconds. However, this version was only sold in the US and Japan. The second generation MR2, called the W20, was introduced in 1989, but first came to the US in the 1990. It was longer, wider, and more powerful than the W10, with some calling it a baby Ferrari or a poor man's Ferrari, since the design of the car was, as you can tell, strongly influenced by Ferraris of the time and had a more Italian vibe, specifically if you compare it to the first generation MR2. And you can now get the MR2 with a 2-liter turbo engine producing 200 horsepower, and this was kind of the standard engine here in the US. The car could sprint from 0 to 60 in around 6 seconds. Now, I've already redesigned the first generation MR2 here on the channel. I'll link that video down in the description if you want to go and check that out. However, in this video, we're going to focus on the third and the final, the happy little MR2, called the W30. The third generation MR2 was called the Toyota MR6 in Japan, Toyota MR2 Spider in the US, and the Toyota MR2 Roadster in Europe. And the biggest change here was that the MR2 was now all of a sudden a convertible from stock. The W30 MR2 had a 1.8-cylinder, 4-cylinder engine producing only 140 horsepower, but the weight was really low, so it did corner very well, and it came with either a 5 or a 6-speed manual transmission. You could option for a 5-speed automatic, but if you did, you'd be an idiot. So now let's have a look at the last generation Toyota MR2 here. Let's sketch some stuff. Let's jump into Photoshop and have some fun. And I can't wait to show you what I have in store for this, the idea of how to redesign this car. But here it is. This is the latest generation MR2. So as I said, if you look at the generations from the 80s, then you have the 90s, and then the 2000s, it's pretty interesting to see, because the first generation is a very congruent with the time it was produced. So it's very boxy and very sharp, such as cars were when they were developed in the 70s and the 80s. Then you come to the Mark II, the W20, and you can see that it starts to become this 90s, you know what I'm gonna say, melted cheese design that pretty much all 90s sports cars and cars in general had. They went from the 80s boxiness to the 90s very soft melted roundness that we had of that time. And then we have the Mark III here, the W30, which to me is a good looking car. It's a clean looking design. There's not a lot of over styling going on here, and you almost have a symmetry from the rear graphics going to the front. So if you look at how the rear lights, for example, are integrated in the body of the car, and then you look at the front at the same time, they kind of have a very nice connection to each other form-wise. So what I want to do here, since all of these generations are so different from each other, I want to create something that if Toyota were to bring this back today, I have a strong feeling it would be very heavily influenced by the Toyota Supra. So I'm going to take some details from the Supra, add it on to this design right here, and also make it more sporty. So I want to have that W20 vibe, but in a modern feel. And of course we can't have pop-up headlights like we did on in the W20. We need to have regular lights, and it's going to be inspired by the Supra. I'm going to take those headlights, remold them, make them suit this type of car better than just simply copy paste Supra headlights onto this. As I said, I want to make it lower, I want to make it more sporty, more confident. I do like this generation because it has such big eyeballs and such a happy face. There's nothing really aggressive about this design. But if you look at the Yaris now, for example, today, even the Yaris looks like an angry little kid. So if this is going to be a sports car, the MR2, we need to make it more angry than we have in the W30 for sure, if we're going to have it be connected with the current Toyota lineup. So what I want to do is, of course, change the wheels. Big deal here. I want to have them planted. I want to have them sit flush with the body of the car here. Going to redesign the whole side of the car here to have it look something like similar to the Supra. We have some lines going here. And also a big deal of the change that I'm going to do here is the rear wheel arch right here, or the rear shoulder. So what I want to have is something that goes further up here and then dips into the body, and then this line somehow is going to connect with some graphics in the front bumper right here. This intake, I really like it, but what I want to do to make it look more modern is to angle these end points right here. So have it be like this instead, so the black covers this part as well. And then this can go into some graphics down here, maybe just a front splitter. I think that would look nice on this car because it suits the Japanese sports car traditions to have some splitters and stuff onto the cars. So you might have to add that. And also a side skirt right here, or a side something to just bring the car down further or closer to the ground. And on top of that, if you look at the graphics of, for example, the Supra, we have a lot going on in the hood here. What I want to do in combination with this rear wheel arch here, or the rear fender, I want to have a sharp line now right here, and I also want to have a sharp line in the front right here as well to create this sporty think Mazda MX-5 or Miata. It has a really nice line that goes right here, and I think it could suit a Toyota MR2 as well, specifically if we integrate it with some new cool lights here with an LED that goes something like this. But on top of that, if you look at the hood design of a Toyota Supra, you have almost a Formula 1 style end point right here. So you go something like this. That means that I want to integrate some lines in the hood of the car to bring it closer to the Supra, and that you can see the connection to the Toyota family and the lineup immediately when you look at the car from a front view. And of course, it needs to change this intake right here as well. I like the position of the intake. It looks good, but I think it needs to be a bit more angular, a little bit, maybe a little big, bigger as well. And then this point, connect this somehow to the shoulder line that we have cutting through the body right here. So it's going to be a very interesting and fun project. So let's continue here in Photoshop, and I can't wait to get started. So let's see how this is going to turn out. Alright guys, so here is my redesign or modernization of the last generation W30 MR2, and I absolutely love the way this turned out. Specifically, I think it has a lot to do with the hood, the front sits lower, it's more of a Supra front, and it's also wider, but it doesn't necessarily have to be wider. The reason why it looks wider is because it sits lower than the Supra, and also the headlights here are similar style as the Supra, although they are a lot smaller. So having them smaller brings the distance between the two headlights apart right here, and this then creates a wider illusion of the car. It looks like the car is wider than it is. And remember, I talked about the Supra hood. I wanted to integrate some sort of curvatures in the front of the hood here, or on top of the hood, because the Supra has almost a F1 style front, especially if you look at the hood, and then it goes down into some weird wings here, which I didn't want to add onto the MR2 because that's one of the parts that I really don't like on the Supra. So I wanted to keep the lower part clean, but at the same time have some connection to the Supra. So I created these creases in the hood here, which you can see, and also sharpen up the shoulder lines here. And I love the way this part turned out right here. You can see that the shoulder line is in fact going right here and then connects into the line right here in the bumper, and then wraps around and goes into some sort of graphic in the rear, of course, if we were to look at this from a rear view. But this little change right here, I think this makes a big difference when it comes to adding muscularity to the car, to the MR2, specifically from the last W30 version, which looks a little weak. And it's supposed to be it only has 140 horsepower, but if this came out today, it's going to be easy 200 plus in the base model. So it needs to look a little beefier than the W30, and adding this curvature right here just brings so much tension to the rear end comparing it to the W30. I kind of left the air intake sort of similar to what the W30 is, just created some more angles on it to have it be more connected to the rest of the body, because now we have a lot more sharper lines here. And this line right here, also inspired by the Supra. If you look at the Supra, it has a bit of an up curve. When you look at this line right here, it goes up right here in the end, and it looks good on the Supra because it suits that car, and I think it looks good here too. And this line also, if you were to extend it, connects to the front part right here, this little chamfer here, which is detail, but details like that is what connects the whole design of a car graphically. So even if this goes up here, this little line right here, if you were to extend it visually, you can still imagine it going forward and connecting into the front bumper like that. And as you can see, the stock, I would say, W30 air intake in the front, the grille right here, it looks good, and I think it suits the car still, 20 years later. But all we have to do is just create some angles to the end point right here, and it becomes a lot more modern than if we were to just have it be like this, straight down and vertical. Other minor updates I wanted to make to this car to make it look modern, of course, the wheels here, straight Supra wheels, and add some width to this rear tire here to make it look planted and make it look more powerful than the W30. And also updating the design and the indicators. I want to have them be integrated right here in the side mirrors, and same thing here, of course. And then I lowered this curvature here. So the original MR2 from the W30, it goes up here and it has a curvature like this. So I wanted to bring that down and create more of that roadster feel. And overall, I'm really happy with how this turned out. It's definitely one of my favorite designs, especially recently, that I've done, because it was so much fun to create this. And now I really want Toyota to bring back the MR2. I'm not sure if they have made any statements about the MR2, if they're planning on bringing it back or not. But if they do, seeing it something like this, with almost like a convertible sibling to the Supra, would be so cool to see, specifically since it's mid-engined. Thank you so much for watching. I'm TheSketchMonkey. If you want either a doodle t-shirt like this or a sketch hat like this one right here, you can check them out in my store down below. Thanks again, take care, and I will see you in the next video.